In Queens, nearly 780 trains a day race through a 180-acre canyon of steel and wire that has divided two neighbourhoods for nearly a century. Now, a Democratic Socialist mayor and Donald Trump want to build a $21 billion city directly above it, and for the first time, it might actually happen. In this video, you're going to find out exactly what they're planning to build over Sunnyside Yard, and why it's unlike anything ever attempted in American history. You'll learn why this project died in the past, how a single unannounced Oval Office meeting brought it back from the dead, and whether the engineering is even physically possible. By the end, you'll understand not just what Sunnyside Yard is, but whether it could become a blueprint for fixing America's housing crisis, and why this unlikely political alliance may be the only reason it has a chance. To understand the 2026 pitch, you have to go back nearly a decade. In 2017, the city commissioned a detailed feasibility study to answer a basic question. Was it even possible to build over Sunnyside Yard at all? Engineers concluded that decking over the rail yard was technically feasible, though enormously complex and expensive. The study explored development scenarios with tens of thousands of potential housing units and laid the groundwork for the master plan that would follow. In 2020, the New York City Economic Development Corporation released a sweeping master plan for Sunnyside Yard, in partnership with the architecture firm Practice for Architecture and Urbanism. The proposal wasn't just about housing, it was an attempt to create an entirely new neighbourhood above one of the busiest rail yards in North America. Sunnyside Yard covers roughly 180 acres. For context, that is roughly 7 times the size of Hudson Yards in Manhattan. The plan proposed decking over approximately 80 to 85% of this active rail yard. This would involve constructing a massive concrete and steel platform above the tracks, upon which an entire neighbourhood would be built. Unlike the glass towers of Hudson Yards, which cater to the global elite, the Sunnyside Master Plan was explicitly designed to address the city's working-class housing crisis. The plan called for 12,000 residential units, with a commitment that 100% would be affordable. Half of these units were earmarked for very low and extremely low-income households, targeting New Yorkers often left behind by market-rate developments. The other half would follow a model that once helped house hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers, regulated cooperative housing created under the Mitchell-Lama program. This approach allows middle-income families to purchase shares in subsidized co-ops, building equity while keeping housing prices stable over the long term. Developments like Co-op City in the Bronx used this model to create one of the largest middle-income housing communities in the United States. In practical terms, that could mean a public school teacher in Queens finally affording to live within walking distance of their classroom, or a transit worker no longer commuting an hour from eastern Long Island just to operate the trains beneath the deck. But the housing was only one part of the vision. The master plan also proposed more than 60 acres of parks, plazas, and green corridors designed to reconnect neighbourhoods that have been physically separated by the rail yard for nearly a century. New schools, libraries, and community health clinics would be built alongside the housing. Perhaps most ambitious of all was a proposal for a new regional rail hub known as Sunnyside Station. The station would allow riders in Queens to access the Northeast Corridor directly, connecting to Amtrak and regional rail without first travelling into Manhattan. But zoom out, and the ambition gets even bigger. Sunnyside Station is designed as a key piece of a broader transformation of how trains move through the entire New York region. Right now, NJ Transit and LIRR trains travel into Penn Station and stop. They terminate, turn around, and go back. The vision is to change that entirely, making Penn Station a through-running hub where a rider could board in Newark and travel all the way to Queens or beyond without a single transfer. Sunnyside Station isn't just a new stop. It's the missing eastern anchor of that system. On paper, it was one of the most ambitious urban redevelopment plans ever proposed in New York City. But paper is cheap. When the master plan was released in early 2020, it was met with immediate crushing headwinds. Weeks after the plan's release, COVID-19 paralyzed New York City. Priorities shifted overnight from long-term urban planning to immediate survival. The city's tax base took a hit, and the massive upfront capital required for Sunnyside Yard, then estimated at $14 to $15 billion for the deck alone, became a political non-starter. At the same time, the project faced skepticism from local communities in Western Queens. Residents in neighbourhoods like Sunnyside and Woodside worried that even a development labelled affordable could trigger rising property values and displacement in the surrounding blocks. There were also practical concerns about infrastructure. Local leaders questioned whether nearby subway stations, schools and sewer systems could handle the arrival of thousands of new residents, despite the plan's promises of upgrades. Taken together, the economic shock of the pandemic, the enormous price tag, and growing political hesitation quietly pushed the project into the background. By the end of 2021, Sunnyside Yard had joined the long list of ambitious New York megaprojects that seemed destined to remain drawings on paper. By 2026, New York's housing crisis had reached a breaking point. Vacancy rates were near zero. Rents were rising even in the outer boroughs. City Hall concluded incremental reform wasn't enough. In February, Mayor Zoran Mamdani walked into the Oval Office with a $21 billion request. Federal backing to construct the largest deck ever attempted over an operational rail yard. He brought with him a custom Daily News mock-up reading, Trump to City, Let's Build. An unmistakable inversion of the 1975 headline, Ford to City, Drop Dead. Where Gerald Ford became a symbol of federal refusal, Mamdani offered Trump the opportunity to become something else. The president who helped rebuild his home borough. The pitch reframed Sunnyside Yard not as public housing, but as national infrastructure, a union-built megaproject predicted to create 30,000 jobs and add 12,000 permanently affordable homes. For Trump, it offered a rare bipartisan win and a tangible construction legacy in Queens. For Mamdani, it provided the only plausible path to the megaproject the city could not finance alone. For the first time since 2020, Sunnyside Yard had federal oxygen, but money alone doesn't define what kind of neighbourhood gets built. Even with political support and potential federal funding, the hardest part of the Sunnyside Yard project isn't the politics, it's the physics. The rail yard beneath the proposed development is one of the busiest in North America, hundreds of trains moving through it every day, serving multiple operators including Amtrak, Metropolitan Transportation Authority, and New Jersey Transit. Unlike projects such as Hudson Yards, where construction could take place over relatively predictable rail operations, Sunnyside Yard is a dense web of tracks, switches, and high-voltage overhead wires that power trains along the Northeast Corridor. To build the platform that would support an entire neighbourhood, engineers would first have to install dozens of massive support columns between the tracks, all while trains continue running below. That means construction crews would be working in extremely narrow time windows, coordinating constantly with multiple rail agencies. Every pillar would have to be placed with surgical precision to avoid interfering with electrified catenary systems and moving trains. Once those columns are in place, the next step is building the deck itself, a massive steel and concrete platform strong enough to hold apartment buildings, schools, streets, and more than 60 acres of parkland. But creating a new landscape above the tracks introduces another challenge: the environment. Unlike normal parks, the soil, trees, and drainage systems would all sit on an artificial platform rather than natural ground. Engineers would have to design complex systems to manage stormwater, support deep-rooted vegetation, and prevent heat from building up across such a large concrete surface. In other words, the project isn't just about building housing, it's about constructing an entirely new layer of city, suspended above one of the most complex rail systems in the United States. But even if the engineering works, the project faces another obstacle: politics. The Mamdani-Trump alliance is a fragile one, and it faces resistance from both ends of the spectrum. Some members of the city council and local activists remain wary of any project that involves federal cooperation with the Trump administration. They fear the project could be privatized later, or that the affordable housing will eventually be converted to market rate through legal loopholes. There is also the aesthetic and symbolic concern of Trump Yard branding, though Mamdani has insisted the project remain a public asset. While the president may be on board, many in the federal government will likely balk at the price tag. They view New York's housing crisis as a local problem and argue that such a substantial federal grant sets a precedent for every other major city to ask for similar bailouts. There are also concerns about what happens outside the project's borders. Even if all 12,000 apartments are permanently affordable, the construction of a world-class transit hub and 60 acres of parkland could make nearby neighbourhoods like Sunnyside and Woodside far more attractive to higher-income buyers. Without strong protections for existing tenants, critics warn that the project could unintentionally accelerate gentrification in the surrounding blocks. There's a version of this story that ends the way most New York megaprojects end, with renderings gathering dust in a planning office drawer and a yard full of trains that never notice the difference. But I don't think that's what happens here. And here's why I say that as someone who has studied a lot of ambitious urban projects that promised everything and delivered very little. Sunnyside Yard is different, not because the engineering is simple or the politics are clean, because they're not. It's different because the housing crisis underneath it is real, and it is getting worse. At some point, a city that cannot house its teachers, its nurses, its transit workers, it stops being a city. It becomes a museum of wealth, visited by the people who used to live there. What strikes me most about this project isn't the $21 billion price tag, or even the spectacle of a Democratic Socialist and Donald Trump sitting across from each other in the Oval Office. It's the fact that they had to, that we reached a moment where the only path forward required two people with almost nothing in common to find the one thing they shared, the belief that something needed to be built. The question I'll leave you with is this: if New York can't do this, with the political will, the land, the federal attention, and the urgent need all aligned at the same moment, then what city can? And what does that mean for the rest of us? If you're drawn to projects like this, the ones where architecture, engineering, and politics collide at the scale of a generation, then this channel is exactly where you need to be. We cover the buildings, infrastructure, and urban visions that are quietly reshaping the world around us. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. These are the stories worth understanding.